Hi everyone, this is Suzanne Wagner, and I am continuing my essays into the ballet world. This one is called Ballet West, Monica Mason, and the Embodiment of Carabosse. I look at my life, and I now can see all the foreshadowing that happened in perfect ways. Those things that did not seem so important at the time were essential to what was going to come, sometimes years later. Some of the smallest moments ended up being some of the greatest gifts I have ever been given. And some of those moments were only one encounter, one evening, one bottle of wine shared, and one special exchange, artist to artist. One such moment for me began with the principal dancer, Monica Mason, coming to dance with the Berlin Ballet. Monica was a lovely woman, kind, gentle-spirited, and very caring to other dancers. One of the things that I loved about being in the Berlin Ballet was the amazing guest dancers that flowed so easily through that world. We were exposed to so many styles, abilities, personalities, and archetypes. Monica was one that I instantly felt a connection to, not from the fact that she and I were alike, but how she just naturally was. What she was real, authentic, and approachable. She came to perform with us and was there not long, probably one or two shows. And honestly, I can't remember what we performed with her, but I do remember is her and I sitting with a bottle of wine and talking late into the evening about dance, different roles, and the responsibility of a dancer to allow for the inner personality to be revealed in unorthodox ways whenever possible. She also had a deep interest in the journey of healing that so many dancers neglected. Her interests ranged from the understanding and detection of eating disorders to the promotion of new techniques for physical therapy with dancers. My experience of her was that while she lived in the traditions of the classics, she was deeply curious about taking risks and stretching the monotony of classics beyond the old tried and true ways towards a more complicated emotional expression that gave more depth to characters that had been historically caricatures. The conversation became much more interesting when she began to dive into the history of a character that she was famous for, Carabosse in Sleeping Beauty. This ballet was perfect on so many levels for the technique and abilities of the Royal Ballet, the RAD trained ballet dancers of England. It is a ballet that is so classically precise that it can be almost grueling. It required meticulous footwork, rapid petit allegros, and characters from one end of the extreme to another. On so many levels, this ballet could come across as saccharine sweet, to the point that you want to throw up if not played properly. It is a perfect ballet from the standpoint that it is about good over evil, and that good will eventually triumph over that evil, a common theme in the old classics. All the fairies in this ballet are happy, celebrating, joyous, and giving. Each fairy bestows gifts to Aurora, the princess who will eventually prick her finger, fall asleep, and slumber till true love finds her and awakens her with a kiss. But such ballets need to have counterpoint, and that character needs to represent the darkness that lurks inside the heart and soul of each person. It must contain the energies of jealousy, anger, resentment, revenge, and that hunger for power. These aspects come into this ballet in the form of one character, Carabosse. Monica was considered the reigning queen of this character. She was regarded as the best in the world. But she did something that had never been done. She took a character that traditionally was danced by a gay man dressed as an evil, ugly, twisted, and miserable witch, and instead turned this antiquated model on its head by taking what had been the wicked witch pattern and instead making Carabosse into a very powerful but very evil queen, powerful in her own right. Monica saw this character as so evil that she used her power to feed off of those lower down and less than herself. She believed that Carabosse used her magic to steal the energy of others to make herself appear to be beautiful, but inside she was a shell that was hateful, jealous, resentful, wicked, and a treacherous fairy. Monica played her as a fairy that did not care to play nice, but instead would play to win at any cost. I listened riveted to her speak for hours on the research she had done about this character and the many versions that had been done over time and why. The desire to bring something with more depth and a character that embodied a deeper, darker, and more sinister evil. She did not play the character as some quirky, crazy, demented man in a woman's dress, but instead made her into an elegant character, one that was slick, sophisticated, smart, intentionally manipulative, and cruel in her almost sociopathic interpretation. I watched her face change as she spoke about the character. I could see the character boiling below the surface of her personality, moving through her, even in that moment. To her, Carabosse was an archetype that lived and breathed inside her being. She allowed this character to love and to be loved. She gave her the space to engage in the dance of existence, and yet could still walk as a mist through time. I had never seen such a transformation in a person that bordered on a type of transfiguration. She emanated something that I had not seen in my life. I could hardly explain it, but I was fascinated by the process of even watching it. One knows when one encounters something unique, and one knows when one is in the presence of greatness. She was magnificent, beautiful, dark, sinister, glorious, maliciously cruel, and yet understated and elegant. There are moments when you realize that you are in the presence of some form of genius. One senses a merging of a human to an elemental. Such a thing is precious and rare, yet it is also intangible and elusive. It exists momentarily in our time, but can never fully stay here. Its fleeting essence touches something within us that is ancient and very old. It activates within us a feeling that is familiar and terrifying. It lures us in and intends to peek into our nightmares and make them real. She was the type of that was the type of Carabosse that she was. And it was a perfect counterbalance to the sticky sweetness of the story of Sleeping Beauty. One cannot understand the beauty and purity of a particular quality of light only if one has been thrown deeply into the despairing darkness of our own inhumanity. Can we see the value of those places within shadow that actually feed our dreams and help us see beyond the patterns that the ego constructs in an attempt to keep us safe, numb, and just existing? There is tremendous value in the embodiment of such characters. Carabosse was one of them. Carabosse, to her, was the entire spectrum of the sinister places that most humans fear to go. She was the epitome of what we refuse to see within ourselves. Her character intended to pull off the masks of the faces in the audience, to reveal their own underlying rot. A toxicity created from the avoidance and misery that humans foster in their denial. After that evening, I dreamed of being a Carabosse at some point in time in this life, but that was not something that the Berlin Ballet did at that time. After one conversation, I read every book on this character. I researched the creation of certain archetypes and where they originally came from and why they surfaced at certain times in history. That one conversation activated that archetype within me, and as my inner Carabosse awoke, she claimed me as her own, and we began a process of integration, preparation, and accommodation. I found my inner Carabosse fascinating, intriguing, and empowering. I liked her. Within me, she was fearless. Within me, she was a force for balance and deeper introspective awareness. Within me, she began to teach me how to embrace my fears and to stand up to those that wanted to live in La La Land. Within me, she became a proponent of questioning the motives of others. She understood that what someone presents is not necessarily who they are, and that one should always be aware of things that seem too simple. And then she temporarily went to sleep. She would return to awaken me to what she had tried to teach me, but what I was not quite yet ready to understand fully. That would take many years. I would get the opportunity to embody her fully, and I would see that so often the world is not ready for the depth of darkness that lurks in the corners of the psyche of mankind. That opportunity came during my time in Ballet West. I was excited to learn that the director at that time, John Hart, was going to bring this ballet to the company. I prayed for an opportunity to do this character. Now, you have to understand, most dancers are not always thrilled about dancing a character role. In large companies, that can be seen as the mark of death, meaning that you are not dancing as well as, say, a younger dancer. When that happens, they begin to put you in character roles to slowly move you from one position in the company to another. Such a change is often a hint that you might be looking for a job somewhere else, and soon. But I was at the top of my game, at least that's what I thought. I did not see this role as a step down. I saw it as a dream coming true. Sure enough, the door opened, casting went up, and lo and behold, I was first cast for Carabosse. I was so excited I could barely stand it until I looked at the casting again and saw that they had, for the second cast, the ballet mistress for the University of Utah, Benet Arnold. Now, don't get me wrong, she's lovely, but old. Character-wise, we were very different. I was much younger and she was older. She was the type that was much more of a character dancer because of her age and look. I was a ballerina in the prime of my life. I knew that we were going to have to present this character very differently for obvious reasons. I wanted to do a Monica Mason Carabosse, slick, sophisticated, evil to her core, a fairy that enjoyed torturing those other puny humans. Benet would present the more classical version of the role, an evil, twisted witch that would be more crazed, sort of funny, and not too emotionally scary for an audience of, oh yeah, right, children. Me, I wanted to scare the crap out of those kids. I wanted to give them nightmares. I wanted to make the audience recognize that what they suppress, they might decide to feed upon. We were different. There would be no way to bind the two together because our visions were drastically antithetical. Rehearsals became interesting. I would do my Monica Mason styled version, and then Benet would do her caricature version. It was awkward. It was so challenging that I asked Denise, the rehearsal directress, if I should do my character differently. But she said she wanted me to do it my way. At the same time, I am battling the process of creating my character. I am also one of the fairies, the Enchanted Forest Fairy, and I am third cast for Lilac Fairy. In Ballet West, I was a part of a group of women, the Three Musketeers, we were called. If one did one role in one night, then the others took another. It rotated around. In most cases, this was great. If Pam Robinson was doing Lilac Fairy, then Marianne Lind would do Enchanted Forest Fairy, and I would do Carabosse. The next night, Marianne Lind would do Lilac Fairy, and I would do the Enchanted Forest Fairy, and Benet would do Carabosse. This way, a dancer got a great role one night and then got an easier show another night or the night off. Most of the time, this worked fabulously. But the role of Carabosse was kicking my ass. The conflicts between me wanting to do this role and that I had dreamed of for years, and the role that my ego was tremendously attached to, were in stark contrast to what Benet was doing, and I did not see how they could work independently and yet together. We were so different. And she, being an older dancer, had her own ego attached to what she was creating as well. Each of us believe in our version of the role, and rehearsals for me were a nightmare of internal emotional conflict and confusion. But it was so bad that it was so bad that I could not get excited about the role of Lilac Fairy. I had no emotional energy for those rehearsals. I had no physical energy either. I did not even want to do those rehearsals. I have to add here that I had gotten chronic fatigue syndrome before this moment. I had been infected with mononucleosis that year, and no one knew that this would cause something unknown at the time and later called chronic fatigue syndrome. I was sleeping 10 plus hours a night. I did not know what was wrong with me, and the stress of this situation with the undiagnosed illness was giving me panic attacks. For me, the mental discipline that it takes to navigate all that was taking its toll. I felt super shitty, but I did not know why. I was seeing doctors, but they could not explain my symptoms and just kept saying I was depressed. But I wasn't depressed. I was exhausted. The doctors insisted that exhaustion was the same thing as depression, but to me, they were not remotely the same. I would later know that I was right. In the middle of this immune system storm, we have the pressure of a full-length ballet that this company barely had enough dancers to do. We are all learning multiple roles, and there are huge amounts of pressure hitting us from many angles. I go to a costume fitting for Carabosse, and I have what seems a costume sculpted to my lovely dancer body. Benet had a more mature body, and so once again, the costume seemed to be in stark contrast. No one told me that they were going to put on a black, red, and green wig on me and would make me look like a deranged, crazy old woman. No one told me that in the fitting that my character that I had so carefully crafted would never work in this costume. No one told me that they were going to put long, scary, cheap-looking fake fingernails on my fingers. No one told me that the director John Hart preferred Benet's version of the character. No one told me that the director wanted the type of a distorted fairy tale Wicked Witch character. Not until I got to the dress rehearsal 3 days before the show did I suddenly realize that my shapely costume had turned into a hag costume. It had crazy things hanging off of it, making it look tattered like a street person or something right out of The Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Witch from the West. Actually, I would have preferred the Wicked Witch's costume from the movie at that point. The only thing I didn't have was a long fake nose. And I got out on stage to do my character, and needless to say, my version falls flat on its face. You can't do a character that is slick and sophisticated in a hag costume. No matter how hard you try, you will look like an idiot. And I was the idiot. I knew it. Everyone knew it. I immediately go to talk to Mr. Hart. I ask for a meeting with him. He agreed, and I sat down in his office, and I asked the question directly and honestly. I said, "You and I both know that I went out in a hag costume, and my sophisticated character fell flat on its face. I need to know, is this the costume? Can I change the costume?" He sat with a smug look on his face and said, "Oh, yes, that is the costume, and no, you can't change it." "Okay," I said, "tell me what you want this character to be in this costume, because the character that I had so carefully crafted is not going to work." He responded in his very English accent, "Well, dear, I know you like to play the woman, dear, but in 1945 at the Royal Ballet, Carabosse was a gay man in drag, so I want you to do it that way." Suddenly my world began to spin. I said incredulously, "Let me get this straight. Are you saying that you want me as a woman to play this character and pretend to be a gay man in drag?" His response was, "Yes, dear." I think to myself, you have got to be kidding me. Seriously? That is insane. But instead of saying that, out of my mouth comes, "Why didn't you cast one of the gay men to play this role instead of me?" He said, "Well, Denise and Louis, the rehearsal directors, believed in you, dear. They thought you might have it in you. But that remains to be seen, doesn't it?" There is nothing like the internal scream of an ego dying. Mine was so loud I could barely hear his words. I only wanted to smack him in the face and say, "Get real. It is not 1945, you old demented egomaniac." I was wise enough to know that such a statement probably would get me fired. I had my internal Callie have a vision of doing just that in that moment. The echoes of my confrontation with Richard Kamek were too close to the surface for my rational thought, and I needed to be rational rather than reactive. Just because a choreographer or a director wants something does not mean they always get it. Sometimes they do not know what they want. They are human also and can miss an opportunity that perhaps a dancer can see. I had frequently done what I knew was a correct way to present a movement, a character, or choreography in a performance, only to have the choreographer director come backstage to congratulate me on doing something perfectly. They would be taking all the credit for my ingenuity and hard work to figure out what was more organic and choreographically fluid. Perhaps I could figure a way to do that here. But I was unsure. After all, I was thrown off my normally strong center for many reasons. I am now struggling to find a door in a room from 1945 with a very closed and smug director who believed he knew everything about this character. I smiled and said, "Okay, if that is what you want, then I will need rehearsals for the next 3 days with Denise to completely change my character to match what you want and what will work with this costume. Is that possible?" He said he would work something out with Denise. I walked out the door and thought someone had dropped me off in the Twilight Zone. I expected to hear the strange music, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, with the whine of a tritone above it. As I walked back into the theater, I knew I was done. While I had not burned the bridge this time, his statements had. I knew that the clock was ticking and that I could not work for a person who would speak such an insane statement. He was stuck in 1945, but I was not. He was playing out his fantasies of his glory days. I was getting tired of the games that egos play in the ballet world. I could feel the joy slipping away from ballet. It felt like wax melting, and the candle of ballet inside was about to go out. I knew it, and I believed he knew it too. But my human self was not ready to go. She was going to give it her best shot. And what a shot it was going to be. For the next 3 days in the private Carabosse rehearsals in the basement near the stage, all I could do was cry. A character is a part of yourself that you create from your bones. This one was a dream that I had ensnared my senses for years. That dream breaking felt like a part of me was dying. In many ways, I would have rather died. It would have been less painful. The Sufis have a saying, "Die before you die." I understood the meaning of that phrase in that moment. In tearing down such a powerful vision, I had to embrace the hag within me. That was something that I did not want to face. I did not want to see myself as some washed-up ballerina being tossed into the graveyard of character roles with no depth, no grace, and no potential. There was no choice. I had to let her go. I had to tear apart this lifelong construct that had been so deeply inspiring to me. I had to go into an honest place of darkness that any young person would never want to tackle. And yet, she was there, waiting for me. Kali knew this witch very well. We finally get to the opening night, and I remember saying to the dancers who would be interacting with Carabosse on her entrance, "I know that you think you know what I'm going to do, but honestly, I do not know what I'm going to do until it happens. Be prepared for anything and everything." I remember Jeff Rogers looking at me in a sort of, okay, sister, let's see what you got stare. And on opening night, I unleashed a tempestuous, dark, twisted, crazed, and crooked hag that was designed to terrify everyone if she would not get her way. I did a performance that, while it was not remotely like Monica Mason, and my dream of this character had died a torturous death, I would find the hag within me that lurked in my own darkest corners, and she would teach me a lot about the goddess Kali and not looking good. She would show me a part of myself that I never, ever wanted to embrace. And she showed me that healing is never kind, never peaceful, never easy, and never what we think. In allowing her fully into my body, I shifted in profound ways that would give me the courage to eventually walk away from ballet completely. And in doing that, she would probably save my life. I owe a lot to Carabosse. I owe a lot to the archetypes such as Kali that give me courage to face my darkest self. I was to learn once again how to integrate into another level of growth, one that would take me beyond the rules and confines of ballet and out into the magical world that waited for me beyond that shattered mirror. Thanks, everyone.